On to U.S. markets. Now U.S. stocks surged with all three major indices registering their biggest daily percentage gains in more than 2 months as lower than expected December core inflation data and solid earnings from major U.S. banks fueled the rally. Take a look.
U.S. stocks rallied on Wednesday, with all three of Wall Street's main indexes registering their biggest daily percentage gains in more than 2 months, after the latest inflation data boosted investors' hopes of more rate cuts by the Federal Reserve. The Dow gained more than 1.6%, the S&P 500 added more than 1.8%, and the Nasdaq soared nearly 2.5%. The Labor Department's Consumer Price Index showed that underlying inflation pressures eased in December. That came on the heels of Tuesday's Producer Price Index, measuring wholesale costs, which rose less than expected. Investors are now pricing in even odds of 2 rate cuts this year. But Jay Hatfield, CEO of Infrastructure Capital Advisors, thinks there will be more.
We think the Fed will need to cut at least 3 or more times for 2 reasons. Number one, we're forecasting PCE core rolls down rapidly after the first quarter to 2.4 and then slowly goes to 2 at the end of the year. But number two, we're in a housing recession, and with rates as high as they are now, 30-year mortgages above 3, that recession is going to worsen, and that'll eventually hit employment, which will get the Fed's attention. So they don't know it yet, but they're going to have to cut 3 or 4 times this year.
The yield on the benchmark 10-year Treasury note tumbled nearly 14 basis points from a 14-month high of 4.8% hit earlier this week. Also boosting stocks Wednesday, earnings from big banks, with shares of J.P. Morgan rising about 2% on a record annual profit as markets rebounded in the fourth quarter. Shares of Wells Fargo jumped 6.7% after the bank's fourth quarter profit beat Wall Street's expectations as a surge in deal-making activity boosted its investment banking business. Shares of Citigroup shot up 6.5% after the bank's earnings report showed it swung to a profit in the fourth quarter. And shares of Goldman Sachs jumped 6%, following the investment bank's best quarterly profit since the third quarter of 2021.